Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News. We're the news division of United Network, and we're also part of CARE, the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth. And our mission is to bring you the real news, which feels like it's really hard to come by nowadays, right? If you are watching mainstream media or alternative media, really, we encourage you guys to use your own discernment because truth is a frequency. And if you can tune into that, you will be able to know what's real and what's not real out there in this crazy world that we live in. And if you watch UNN, we will give you as much information as we possibly can as we find it out to just keep you guys informed so you know what's going on. And we release a lot of content throughout the week, okay? That includes our amazing stories, our local stories, through our field messengers, which I'll tell you more about in just a bit. We have in-depth news coverage from the team. That means we go, a little bit more in-depth with perhaps some headlines that you're seeing out there and maybe give you a little bit more of the why behind it. And then we have absolutely exclusive information coming from our friends at the Global Intelligence Agency. And Kim Gogan is the head of the GIA. I'll play some of her sound bites at the end of today's episode. And really, this is boots on the ground of what's really happening here on our planet in the ultimate battle of good versus evil, which we all hope is, this long battle we've been having with the dark. We are definitely winning, and we hope to be out of this matrix very, very soon. If you want more information on who UNN is and what we do, you can visit our website at unitednetwork.earth. This podcast is a week in review because, like I said, we put out a lot of content, and I know it's hard to keep up sometimes. You guys all have really busy lives, and if you're anything like me, time is somewhat of an illusion right now. Sometimes my days go really long, sometimes they're really fast, and I can miss things sometimes. And so this is a great way to get caught up on any important information that we're releasing throughout the week. Also, if you would like to share UNN with other people, because when we release our content for the first week, it is only available to our members. And then after that, we put it out on YouTube and Rumble and hope and pray that it stays up there. But the censorship teams that work for those sites and the algorithms and all that fun stuff, that's all part of the matrix. And so we can't really control what stays up there. If you want instant access to any of our content, visit our website and learn more about how you can become a member. With any content we release and anything that you're posting out there, you're sharing with other people, or, it's just coming across your news feed, think critically about what you're hearing, what you're seeing, and ask yourself questions. This whole frequency thing, truth is a frequency. And you can train yourself to recognize it. And the more you do that, the easier it will be for you to discern what is real and what is not real. It's kind of like having your own little internal superpower because it's something that not a lot of people know about, but now you know, so no excuses. All right, let's get to the stories. Here are the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. So let's talk about our field messengers because we believe this is how, one of the ways at least, we're going to change the face of news. If you guys are tired of some talking head on the news telling you what they think you should know or some sort of narrative, well, you've come to the right place because we're all sick of that too. And we think the best way to share information is for you guys to report on it. Okay, and that doesn't mean you have to have some fancy degree or fancy equipment. That just means you need to share what's going on in your community. And we are providing a platform for you guys to do that. So tell us what's going on. If you do that, welcome to being a field messenger. And we have a lot of people that have done stories over the years from all sorts of different countries. And this week is no different. If you want more information on how you can become a field messenger, we've got a lot of resources to support you in that, including an entire production team that actually puts the stories together for you. So if you would like more information on what all that is about, then visit our website at unitednetwork.earth. Okay, here are the field messenger stories that we released this week. Amy actually has a few stories. I think there's 3 stories from Amy this week. And the first one is headed back to Barnegat Light Inlet. So she has been, I think she was calling it Barnegat Bay. I think we've done a few stories now. And I think this is one of the best ways to do stories is when you go to a place or, a location, something like that, see if there's multiple stories you can get. Amy is a pro at that. And so we go back to the Barnegat area, which is in New Jersey, and we learn more about the commercial fishermen of the time. There was a statue there, and she got to learn a little bit more about the history. As you can imagine, fishermen have a very different life. I don't know if you've ever watched any of those like reality shows. I've seen a few of them. They're gone. They're away from their families. The conditions are pretty... How do I want to say this? They can be very dangerous, but also not always that cleanly, right? Is that a word? Cleanly? No, cleanliness is in question, right? But they love it. They love what they do, and they can bring in some good money for their families. But this is the story of what these fishermen go through, specifically commercial fishermen in that area. In fact, on this statue, this monument, the base part of it tells various stories of fishermen. And again, just the role the fishermen had and their way of life, which many times is passed down through generations. All right, Emma out of Spain, except she kind of partnered with her sister for this story because most of the video and photos we saw, I believe, are out of Norway, where her sister lives. But very beautiful, if you guys are familiar with the Aurora Borealis. So these are also known as the Northern Lights, and it's one of nature's most extraordinary phenomena. Comes in all sorts of colors, but apparently where her sister is in Norway, it usually shows up as bright green. Of course, there's a science behind this, right? It's like a spectacular celestial light show. Quick story, I lived for a couple years. I lived in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in the United States, which is practically in Canada. We're like a hop, skip, and a jump from Canada. At least I was at the time. And everyone would talk about the Aurora Borealis. And I was in my early 20s when I was there. It was the first news station that I worked at. And I can't say that I was all that interested in the Aurora Borealis. It sounded cool, but I was not willing to get up at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to go out in the freezing cold, because it was really, really cold up there, and figure it out. But now I kind of wish I had, because I see these photos and I'm like, gosh, that's just amazing. So thank you, Emma, and Emma's sister, for sharing this story with us. Akira from Japan tells us a little bit more about what their New Year's customs are like, right? So, they go through the holidays and then they have New Year's, and what is really going on in their area, in the Tokyo area, I should say. Japanese New Year's traditions. And he talks about things like visiting shrines, doing various types of worshiping, which is important in their culture, and of course, enjoying local street food, which looked amazing, and just spending time with one another. So if you want to learn a little bit more about what happens in the Tokyo area for New Year's Eve, or New Year's, I should say, check out this story. Sophia out of Trinidad and Tobago, specifically Tobago, tells us about a couple, I think there's 2 different shops that she does in this story. One is this beautiful little cafe and craft shop. It's by the seaside, so they have a lot of local crafts there. And this is also a place where you can learn to make delicious chocolate. She says from bean to bar. And in the video, we specifically see kids making chocolate. Apparently in Tobago, Trinidad as well, they have incredible chocolate there. And when I say incredible, I am talking about the chocolate companies of the world want this chocolate. And I think she called it Trinario. And it is famous for its flavor, again, world famous. And we talked to a chocolatier, this man. Okay, here's the thing, guys. I don't think I've ever said this on a rundown report before. If you get a chance, go and watch this story. And if you've already seen it, go back and watch it. Specifically for the man who runs this chocolate shop. And I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I am telling you, I got my little spidey senses went off when I saw him. He seems like an absolutely wonderful man. So I just want to say that off the top. But there is something else about him that is not of this planet. Okay, so go back. If you've already seen the video, go back and watch it again and tell me what you guys think, because that was like my little spidey sense went off and I'm like, oh, first of all, he's just a lovely human being. Second of all, there is a vibe, a frequency about him that says I am not from this planet, meaning I did not incarnate on this planet, but I'm here to help. So sometimes we talk about this kind of stuff and people are like, oh, I've never seen, someone who wasn't, from this planet, or someone who incarnated here and was born here. And this is just one of those examples. So go take a look if you haven't already. All right, Tony is out of Italy, takes us to opera night in Verona. So Italy has, if you don't already know, one of the oldest and most iconic opera arenas in the world. And oh my gosh, you guys, the architecture over there, the acoustics, which someone who does a lot of speaking and things like that, I really appreciate good acoustics. And so Tony shows us the beauty of this place, the elegance. She saw an opera there. She said it was on her bucket list. Truly looks like a Roman arena. And apparently they like to stay up pretty late because this finished at about 12:30 in the morning. So technically the next day. And it looked like everyone had a great time. All right, Adam out of Pennsylvania, which is a state in the U.S., takes us to his yard. He has a self-sustaining garden, and that includes some raised beds, tropical plants. He even has some chickens there, so the whole deal. And he talks about the different techniques that he uses when he is planting. Something called companion planting, which I think is really interesting because a lot of us, when we plant, we have a tendency to group plants together. Like, oh, this is all of my spinach is going to go here. All my kale is going to go here. All of my lettuce is going to be here, right? And we kind of segregate it out. But that's not really how nature works. And so for me, this story was a reminder of when you mix it all together, it's kind of like people, right? When you put us all together, we can do some really cool things. It's when you separate us that we don't function the way nature really intended us to function, right? So Adam, thank you for your story because it was a great reminder. Chris out of California, another state in the U.S., my state actually, talks about connecting with nature. I love Chris's stories because he's just in the moment. He was out on his bike. He stopped to connect with nature at Auburn State Park. He just talks about how he goes outside and how it helps him recharge, reflect, find a sense of inner peace. In the video, he's literally just taking his socks and shoes off. He's standing in the river, talking about getting his toes in there and the rocks and the dirt and just going outside and grounding. So, Chris, thank you for that reminder. Again, Amy out of New Jersey. So I guess Amy only had 2 stories this week. Yeah, no. There's another one. I was right. There were 3 stories. So this is the second Amy story. And this is about Long Beach Island. So when she was out at Barnegat Bay, she was also just exploring other places on Long Beach Island because it is an 18-mile barrier island that is famous for beaches, historic towns, marine charm. And she tells us a little bit about the history there. There was a city or an area called Beach Haven. They actually had this fantasy island amusement park, which looked kind of fun. There was an area called Surf City, which guess what they do there, guys? They surf. And then Barnegat Bay as well, which we've been learning about over the last few weeks. All right, Mike out of Louisiana takes us to a powwow and tells us all about the dancers. And he says the dancers, they are more than just performers. They are keepers of tradition. They are honoring their tribal heritage through rhythmic movement and song. And he tells us about some of these different dancers. I never really thought about it this way. He said, and he shows video of this as he's talking about it, But there are traditional dancers. There are what do you call fancy dancers, which they have some fancy footwork. And it's like their clothing is a little bit more elaborate. They have jingle dress dancers that obviously jingle, and which can be incredible, by the way, for healing, they said. Grass dancers, which just means the clothes that they have on kind of resembles grass and being one with nature. And also dancers that have, it kind of looks like a shawl or fringe on their clothing, and that is connected to the butterfly. And so it's just a very beautiful story and explanation, which I've never really heard anyone say, of, these types of powwows and the different groups of people that they're representing within these powwows. Very cool. And the third Amy story, I knew we'd get to it eventually, is about something most of us have gone through, at least in the U.S., and I know into Canada as well this week, and that is this crazy snowstorm. So again, Amy is in the New Jersey area, and she tells us what's going on in her area. Everything from, having snow all over your driveway, and then you shoveled the snow, and then someone goes and plows the street, and then you're blocked in again from that snow coming onto your property, right? All the things that anyone who has lived in a very snowy area could totally understand. And I don't know, here in California, guys, I have to admit, we're not getting the snow. But if you look at a map, it's very interesting because it is crazy hot here for this time of year. So we're actually experiencing the exact opposite, which really doesn't even make sense. It's a whole other story, right? But when it comes to controlling the weather, modifying the weather, this is just one more way we know that this is still happening, because you just don't have these types of fronts come in where it is way, way, way super hot on the West Coast, and then like freezing and, crazy snow weather, throughout the rest of the country. And like I said, even into Canada. And here are some of the more in-depth stories the team and I worked on for you guys this week. So let's talk about the Affordable Care Act here in the U.S., which a lot of people were part of the Affordable Care Act. This is how they were getting their health benefits. And, we can argue about should that have even come into effect. This was during Obama's presidency that this was enacted. But at the start of 2026, millions of Americans who buy their own health insurance through the Affordable Care Act were hit with sudden, steep premium hikes after enhanced Affordable Care Act subsidies expired. This is what the previous government shutdown was all about. At least that's what they claimed, right? And in some cases, this had a huge impact on people. Some cases even doubling monthly costs overnight.
Millions of Americans just woke up in 2026 with a surprise. Their health insurance just increased drastically in price. Overnight, the enhanced ACA subsidies expired, and Congress did nothing to stop it. Nothing. But I don't think anyone is surprised. These tax credits kept premiums affordable for over 20 million people. Self-employed workers, farmers, small business owners, parents, people who don't get insurance from a job and don't qualify for Medicaid or Medicare. Some families are seeing costs double. Others are seeing them triple.
The subsidies introduced during the pandemic and later baked into how Obamacare even functioned helped enrollment grow to more than 24 million people, but became a political casualty of budget fights and deficit concerns because it costs a lot of money. With lawmakers deadlocked, analysts warn millions could drop coverage, pushing premiums even higher for those who remain. While the House passed an extension bill, the Senate has not taken action on this, and this leaves families and freelancers, a whole lot of people, in limbo as healthcare once again becomes a promised deferred. China's population is shrinking for the third year in a row as birth rates fall to roughly half of what they were a decade ago, revealing how deeply decades of the one-child policy reshaped family life.
Remember when China had the one-child policy? They're now facing a population crisis. Over 20% of China is over 60 years old. It has been 10 years since they started to reverse it. After realizing that declining population is directly affecting the economy, and their ambition to rival the US as a military power. And of course, having fewer young workers will hurt the entire economy too. Honestly, you cannot just tell people, yalla, go have more kids again. And life is already expensive and exhausting. Cash bonuses and extended maternity leave won't fix it easily, huh? It's super complicated.
Even after scrapping all birth limits and offering subsidies and parental benefits, high housing, childcare, and education costs, along with job insecurity and shifting social values, well, all of that has made starting a family feel out of reach for many young adults. The result is an aging society, widening urban-rural gaps, and mounting pressure on pensions and healthcare systems, with long-term consequences for China's economy and workforce that policy tweaks alone may not fix. Walking in India, well, that often means navigating broken or non-existent sidewalks, parked vehicles, and crowded streets in cities designed around cars rather than people. Despite pedestrians making up a huge share of daily travel, poor planning and neglected footpaths forced millions to walk alongside fast-moving traffic in India, contributing to alarmingly high injury and death rates.
Why is walking in India treated like a punishment? Try walking on the road and people look at you like, bro, can't you afford a vehicle? Globally, walking is a lifestyle goal. In Tokyo, people walk 8,000 to 10,000 steps a day. In Europe, walking is culture. In India, walking is an extreme sport. You dodge bikes, garbage, and cows all before breakfast. But it's not just people's mindset, it's the system. We've built cities for cars, not for humans.
While government programs promise more walkable cities, experts say real change will only come when urban planning consistently prioritizes safe, accessible sidewalks over aesthetics, making streets safer for everyone who depend on them. Medical neglect in U.S. prisons is a systemic problem, not an exception, with legally guaranteed care routinely delayed or denied due to underfunding, weak oversight, and security-first policies. As a result, treatable conditions often become life-threatening, contributing to more than 1,000 jail deaths each year, many linked to preventable illnesses like sepsis.
People don't just go from having a little cold to sepsis. It takes time for you to reach that point after you get infected. And so experts told me that a lot of times sepsis is actually an indicator of the care that preceded that condition. It can show that something else is going wrong with a jail or a prison. USA Today years ago sued the US Department of Justice to get records showing in-custody deaths in jails and prisons. We finally got those records after a federal judge sided with us and they had to turn them over. We analyzed about 48,000 deaths in jails and prisons from 2015 to 2023. And as I was looking through those, sepsis kept popping up over and over again.
Investigations and lawsuits show the crisis is worsened by dehumanization and profit-driven private health contractors, revealing a system where cost-cutting and indifference repeatedly outweigh incarcerated people's right to basic medical care. Beach safety doesn't travel as easily as tourists do, and mismatched flag systems and warning signs can turn familiar ocean habits into serious risks abroad. With no single global standard, colors, symbols, and phrases often mean different things from country to country, leading many visitors to misunderstand where it's safest to swim. This is happening a lot in Australia.
Red and yellow flags are an iconic and necessary staple across hundreds of Aussie coastlines. But for overseas visitors, the meaning of the flags isn't always clear, and many associate them with danger rather than protection. Drowning prevention researcher and lifeguard Dr. Masaki Shibata knows firsthand about the dangers of big swells combined with inexperienced swimmers, and is pushing for changes to ensure a safer beach experience for everyone. His recent study revealed that over 70% of overseas visitors surveyed interpreted the red and yellow safety flags as signaling a danger zone. Dr. Shibata told Yahoo News, "Red is universally recognized as a warning color. A lot of people associate the color with red traffic lights, so it gets confusing. We need to find a way to deliver the safety message to those who are not aware of the risk."
Until beach warnings become more universal, experts say the best protection is simple. Never assume you know what a flag means. Ask lifeguards for guidance and stick to patrolled areas where hidden dangers like rip currents are more likely to be spotted in time. Sinkholes form when water eats away at underground rock, leaving hidden voids that can collapse slowly over time or suddenly without warning on land or underwater. They're most common in places with soft rock and heavy groundwater flow and can be triggered or accelerated by extreme weather, drought, or human activity like construction and groundwater pumping. And you can find a lot of these sinkholes in Turkey.
Nearly 700 sinkholes are tearing open Turkey's farmland, and the country's main breadbasket is literally caving in. Close to 684 large sinkholes have been found across the Konya Plain, the region that grows much of Turkey's wheat, and new ones are showing up every year. Scientists blame a dangerous mix of extreme drought, climate change, and decades of heavy groundwater pumping. In the Karapanar district alone, more than 20 new sinkholes opened in the past year, some stretching 100 feet across and plunging hundreds of feet down.
When they open up, sinkholes can cause injuries, deaths, and costly damage to roads, buildings, and utilities, making them a growing risk for communities worldwide and a reminder of how fragile the ground beneath us can be. Braille music. Have you heard of this before? Well, it lets people who are blind or visually impaired read and write music through touch, using raised dots to represent notes, rhythm, and expression. And it gives musicians independence to study, practice, and perform without relying solely on listening or memorization. And it is especially powerful when introduced at a young age. This is definitely one of those videos that you should go back and watch because me trying to explain it does not do it justice. But here's a little bit more about it.
So the Braille cell is a set of 6 possible dots that could be raised. The top 4 in Braille music are the ones that show you what note is being played, and the bottom 2 dots are the ones that show you how long you played them for. It's a really super code, and you can write crescendo and you can write decrescendo. Anything that you see in your print gets represented in the Braille.
While learning and accessing Braille music can be challenging due to limited scores and a steep learning curve, growing digital tools and libraries are making it more accessible for students and professional musicians alike. Check out charity. Well, this has become a powerful fundraising machine, raising hundreds of millions of dollars each year by asking shoppers to donate small amounts at the register. While many people appreciate the convenience, new research shows these requests often trigger pressure, guilt, and skepticism, especially when shoppers feel watched or unsure where the money is going.
Why is nobody talking about the whole donate when you check out at a store thing? Like, I was at a Walmart the other day checking out, and they're like, hey, do you want to make a donation to this charity for like an extra like $1 to $10? I'm like, no, I'm shopping at Walmart. The minute you walk into Walmart, your class level goes from here to like down there, right? Like, what about me says like, hey, I'm a big spender at Walmart. I have enough money to donate because I'm shopping at Walmart. I'm literally shopping at Walmart because I want to spend the least amount of money on pretty much everything you have in the store. I want to buy a box of crackers for 50 cents. It literally could just be like a government-issued box of crackers. Why would I want to donate? Also, you're a billion-dollar organization. Why don't you donate? Just use some of the profits that I give you from the sale, from the stuff I'm buying, and use that to donate.
He definitely has an opinion, doesn't he? As rising living costs make giving harder, studies suggest poorly timed donation asks can backfire, leaving customers less satisfied and more wary, even as retailers and charities continue to rely on this fast, friction-filled form, say that 5 times fast, of generosity. When airports close, they often leave behind vast empty spaces, but many cities are reimagining these former airfields as valuable opportunities rather than lost infrastructure. Built for earlier eras of aviation or military use, many sites became outdated as technology changed and urban land values rose, making redevelopment more practical than preservation. From housing and business districts to parks, cultural spaces, and renewable energy projects, transformed airports like Denver's Stapleton and Berlin's Tempelhof. Those are just a couple of examples.
Imagine an airport so big, they turned it into a public park, and somehow it still feels like it could take off. When I walked into Tempelhofer Feld for the first time, I didn't expect it to feel so freeing. There's something about the open space. It literally makes you breathe deeper. This place used to be an airport. Now, it's Berlin just being Berlin. People skate, picnic, garden, play music. It's raw and unpolished.
So these airports, they really show how retired runways can be turned into engines, no pun intended, okay, pun intended, for economic growth, sustainability, and community life, even as cities navigate environmental cleanup and preservation challenges. Okay, now we've got some updates from the Global Intelligence Agency. Kimberly Gogan is the head of the GIA. And she had one video that came out this week. She's been very, very busy, as you guys know. And this video was about an hour and a half long. Lots of good information. Overall, I think there was a lot of information in this video about current events. So if you are very much interested in that, you may want to go back and watch the entire thing, listen to the entire thing. I'm going to give you some highlights. I have 2 sound bites. The first one is going to focus more on current events, and then we're going to get a little more into the light and dark. We're going to talk about alchemy and how the deep state really likes alchemy and how they tried to use that against us. Okay, so let's talk about some current events. Davos, Switzerland. You know how they say like the Swiss are the neutral people? Like that's a huge lie, by the way. And if you're from Switzerland, I'm sure you're a lovely person. When I say that I do these shout outs of different places in the world like China or whatever, it is never about the people. It is about the crazy humans that are at least think that they're running. They're doing a really crappy job of running, but they think they're running these different countries, right? So the World Economic Forum is like hypocrite central, right? This is where they come up with all these rules. You know, we're going to own nothing and be happy, and we have to watch our carbon footprint. Meanwhile, they come in on these jets, and it's just ridiculous. They are one giant walking contradiction. And some of the themes, according to Kim, from the World Economic Forum, just in case you're curious, was about crypto. We're going to talk a little bit more about crypto, but crypto. And why are they talking about crypto? Because they are broke and they would like to use dead money, which is what cryptocurrency literally means, because only things that are dead go in a crypt. All right, so consider that next time someone says got to buy this new coin or whatever. It is dead money, dead currency. It's not real, guys. So there's a lot of talk about crypto because they have no money and they want to invent something out of thin air. They want war because this is part of the deep state agenda. You have war and money falls out of the sky. Not exactly out of the sky, but it comes from a system, at least it did in the past. Kim's talked a lot about this. So they want war because they need money. The pillaging of smaller countries, because if you can't have a fake currency and you don't have war, then you must steal. We're going to talk more about stealing because they don't just steal from small countries, they steal from us as well. So this was kind of the theme going on, you know, because this is what good people do when they get together. They talk about this kind of stuff. And so apparently, just if you want a little bit of background information, Kim said there were some mechanical issues on Air Force One. And that's because it was heavily tied to an AI system that we are dismantling. And it went out at the same time. I don't know if Air Force One was in the air, whatever. So it caused some issues. I guess he was late because of that. I just find that to be hysterical, not something you're going to hear about in mainstream media. Apparently Trump, and by the way, that is not the real Trump. So hopefully, you know, no one listening to this is putting all their faith and hope in the orange man who's not even real. But he did not get a warm welcome, at least publicly, at Davos, right? Behind the scenes, by the way, everyone's buddy because this is all a show. Politicians are actors. Kim has said numerous times that several weeks before these events are when the operatives go out, and that's when all the deals are made. What you saw, or you think you saw on mainstream media, is a bunch of people just yapping it up and, you know, acting like they're important, but they don't do any of the heavy lifting. All right, so there were many meetings trying to hash out this whole thing between the U.S. and NATO. Again, this is all for our show, okay, because the decisions have already been made. But at least on a public level, they do not want the U.S. to invade Greenland. This does not have anything to do with protecting indigenous people or animals or anything like that. This has to do with an upcoming eclipse that is supposed to take place in August in Greenland. They somehow think that this is going to be a beneficial eclipse for them. Perhaps it has been helpful to them in the past, but we live in a different world. We are rapidly dismantling all of their systems, which include these crazy AI systems. And whatever eclipse may or may not happen in August is not going to help them whatsoever. But that's why you're hearing so much about Greenland. It's about an eclipse. Can you believe this? All these different talks, it's all over the news. It's about an eclipse and ultimately about them thinking that they're going to get power, which for them is usually in the form of money, so they can do their nefarious things. Okay. According to Kim, there were more synthetic humans there than real people. So that kind of tells you everything you need to know about Davos. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about crypto. We're going to talk more about currency in general, but we'll talk first a little bit about crypto. They follow a script, you guys, okay? And their brains are connected to these AI systems. Literally, this is who they are. They are not, I was going to say they're not human, but if you've never listened to us talk about this before, they actually are human. But human is an acronym, which I can't even remember off the top of my head right now, but humans, actual humans, which probably no one listening to this is, do not have an organic soul. These are synthetic souled people, and that's really what a human is. So most people listening to this, unless you're deep state, are Homo sapiens. That's who we naturally are. We have an organic soul. So that's why I was saying about Davos, there's more synthetic humans there than real people, real Homo sapiens. So when you're synthetic, you run on programs. There's nothing organic about you. You may look like a regular person. You may smell like a regular person, and you may have a lot of the traits normal people have, normal Homo sapiens have. But you are anything but. Your brain kind of runs on a loop because that's what the Matrix is. It just loops and just takes you through the same patterns over and over again. And for the deep state, it is the same playbook, right? We were talking about war. That's because that's how they got money in the past. So, we got to start a war. It's got to be World War III because that's how we get money. This is what their brain tells them when their brain is connected to an AI. So it's really the AI explaining this, right? They do not understand when reality changes, when the fabric of reality changes, which is what's happening right now. It does not compute. It does not compute. And so when it comes to crypto, they have been their brains have been told this is what you do. This is what the AI system is saying. We're going to go to crypto now. And they don't reason it out. They don't think, well, we don't actually have the computing power to make this work. They're just like on autopilot. That's a good description. They are on autopilot, listening to voices in their head or whatever from this AI system that doesn't understand what's going on because our world on the back end is now connected to source, to God. And it doesn't understand, the AI system does not understand instructions from source or God. It understands whatever it was programmed to understand. So that's really what's happening on our planet right now. And that's probably why things seem kind of crazy. And Kim does talk about that a little bit later in the second soundbite that I'm going to play. So let's talk a little bit more about currencies. That includes crypto, right? We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Venezuela because that's tied to an oil contract over there, and just how the deep state is on this autopilot when it comes to cryptocurrency. Here's Kim.
They know that our financial system, the one that's currently running the backbone behind all of their overlays, is not willing to release any funds to them for their purposes. They have tried, they have hacked, they have tried to put old dollar bills that have been on pallets in places like the Philippines and Germany and South Africa and Argentina and Venezuela and other places in the world that were printed by the Black Eagle Trust, then party, Bush Sr., when it was done. They've been trying to put all these things in the system for a long, long time now, realize they have no control over the dollar or the issuance of new dollars at this point, not realizing they actually have no control over the issuance of currencies from any other country in the world either. And neither does the Federal Reserve. They believe if they can get a hold of a currency that they can issue allocations for, and then they can revive their global financial system control system. However, this isn't really working out very well. You know, we do not have an alpha system anymore, that alpha and omega system anymore. We barely have any other type of quantum systems that they have access to anymore, and they are waning rapidly. You know, as we pull things apart, they try to implement new timelines and overlays and those types of things this week, but that's not working out either very well. They don't hold for very long. There's an energy issue and a disconnection between the power of that system and you, the people. So that has worked to our advantage quite often and quite a bit. Talk about that too. But as far as these resources, for example, that they pillaged out of Venezuela, we talked about the fact that they sold a little oil and tried to make these contracts work. And this is very relevant to some other things that we're hearing behind the scenes, not only in Davos, but also throughout the financial world. So they've been trying to leverage these resources. Now, in the world of banking, contracts used to be king. In other words, if you had a contract for gold, BlackRock would be happy to leverage against that contract to put the gold into their portfolio and therefore end up, which they did for a time, controlling the entire commodities future market of the world. This was all structured after World War II. And they have been on top for that very reason. The resource itself that is behind the contract, be it gold, silver, rare earth minerals, oil, gas, you name it, is not really relevant in the world of finance. It only has a value because they give it a value. And technically, in some cases, you could say we give it a value. How much do we value putting petrol or oil or gas in our vehicles? How much do we value this in cold winters in places that are heated with heating oil? How much value do we place on some of these items like cotton and clothing and orange juice and other things that are on the commodities futures market? Even if you're not interested nor can afford to invest in silver or gold or things like that, there are still many other things that you use on the daily that make these things valuable. However, most all of them are plentiful. So this riding of the market and the price going up and down, and then therefore that price getting passed on to you, the consumer, is not real. That is called artificial hyperinflation. It costs the same amount of money today as it did 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, and even 10 decades ago. Realistically speaking, if we were not dependent on a market to grow oranges, to raise pigs for pork that are also traded on the commodities market, or beef, or other things that appear there, realistically, it costs the same. Now, I know farmers are going to yell at me when they hear about this because they're going to say there's no way it goes up all the time. But that's because there are things that are required to farm that are also listed on the market, such as grain, such as urea and fertilizer, and God forbid those terrible seeds we call Monsanto hybrid seeds or whatever they are. So all of these things are very relevant to the change in the cost of farming, for sure. Droughts and artificial weather control and things that have been that are far beyond the farmer's control also play a factor. But in the case of Venezuela, to go back to that, they managed to pilfer and get contracts and whatnot for millions of barrels of oil, large contracts, which normally they would take to BlackRock, and they did, to try to get a leverage or a factoring against that contract. They told them in order for the contract to be good in the financial sector, which is true, you must sell the contract must be active. You must be able to actively extract it from the ground, refine it, and sell it. So they sold a little bit, a small amount, 500 million or so, or something like that. Not nearly enough to support a multi-trillion-dollar contract for sure. And now the Trump administration is being forced to learn Banking 101. They don't like Banking 101 very much, especially since the base platform is not permitting this corrupt banking that they so love and enjoyed for many decades. So they decided they're going to roll out crypto again, and they were really pushing it this past week, last 10 days, I would say, but last week in particular, especially before the Davos, whatever that is, show, series, movie. They've been pushing it quite hard through some of their resources in order to see if they could launch a platform backed by oil, gold, silver, and anything else they have begun to pilfer from other countries, including the planned loot from Iran. So they have been using this past week, maybe 10 days or so, the Microsoft Azure platform. The Microsoft Azure cloud platform, for those of you that don't know what this is, it is a web hosting service in which your website and or software, hardware, software, etc., is all run on a remote server, to put it in layman's terms, and it is hosted all in their Azure data centers worldwide. And your information is all stored on there. Everything is stored on there. They have a backdoor analytics program that analyzes everything in their Azure platforms. And this allows for them to continue spying on you, even though Echelon and other major spying machines are really not working very well. So they have tried to actually even place all banks on the Azure Microsoft platform in the past, and we've talked about this in the news. That also has been failing as well. But this time they're trying to launch a worldwide crypto platform on Microsoft Azure, and because it cannot process that many transactions, they managed to consistently, in the last 10 days, knock out all of their companies that are dependent on the Azure cloud hosting server system several times. So if you've experienced any kind of disruptions over the last week or so with certain things, you can thank the Trump administration operative people, there's almost about 200 of them or something like that, for trying to launch crypto on a platform that is not capable of processing even just for a third of the United States. It just would never happen. We have too many point of sale platforms. We have too many point of sale devices. We have way too many people buying things online, Amazon, you name it, banks doing transactions. You know, these things happen in a just a minute or two before it's withdrawn from your account. It's a quick ping back and forth. There's no way they can do that with that many times per second that are needed in order to launch this platform. And that became obvious to all of the companies out there in which they service.
So in the past, we've talked about genetic shareholders. What do I mean by that? Who are the genetic shareholders? These are more commonly known as the banking families. You can go on YouTube and see a lot of historical videos about who the banking families are. And the biggest one that gets thrown out there is the Rothschild family. So according to Kim, they had a meeting recently, and they said they could no longer support the banks. And that means central banks, guys. And their whole thing was central banks run the world. So what happens when they can no longer support central banks? I mean, according to Kim, they are now just trying to preserve their own lineage, okay? So they're not even thinking about preserving their creation, these crazy banking systems. They're going into preservation mode. Trust me, it's not like they are starving, okay? But when you have billions and billions, trillions, whatever it is of dollars, you know, what it looks like if you say you don't have any money, that looks a little bit different than when I say I don't have any money, okay? But they are in preservation mode, which really makes you wonder what's going to happen here with our banking systems and our central banks and everything that is connected to the central banks. All right, the second soundbite that I want to play is on a little bit different level, okay? We're going to talk about how the deep state, we know they steal constantly, right? We were talking earlier about how they're taking from these smaller countries. We talked a little bit about Venezuela and what's going on over there. But they steal a lot from us on an energetic level, and in so many different ways, not just our energy, but they take so much from us. And we're going to talk a little bit more about light and dark alchemy and how the dark alchemists really were trying to steal a lot of things from us, and how they ultimately, not even the people that are around now, but the people, the head honchos that were way above them, were ultimately after the divine spark of life. So that is the God particle, if you will. And we all have that. All Homo sapiens have that. But if you are artificial, if you have an artificial soul, you do not have the divine spark of life within you, which means you cannot function unless you are taking from something that has a divine spark of life and transmuting that energy, because you can't just take on light energy, right? It's got to be dark and nasty. So there was a whole process for all of that. So here's Kim telling us a little bit more about the different things that were stolen from us, because again, they're trying to steal everything, you know, they're trying to acquire all these different assets. And right now, the deep state, their very lives depend on stealing from us. They are parasites. And that's not to be mean. This is literally, you guys, they are parasites. They have to take in order to exist. So their very existence is slipping away. Does everybody know this? It's in the deep state? Who knows? You know, they got the little AI thing going on. Who knows what the AI is actually telling them? But I'm sure there are people that understand what's going on. And for those people, it's probably scary because their time is limited. Here's Kim.
We talked about looshing before. We've talked about energy looshing. We've talked about why the banking system works the way that it does. And all of these things are to feed dark alchemy. Now, alchemy by definition is simply taking something that is natural and from nature and utilizing it in the flow of what you would call natural law. And that's not our sovereign man definition of natural law. What that means is source has its own essence, its own language, its own life code, if you will. It's not coding as in a computer system. It is a natural way things work. These trees go with these plants. There needs to be X amount of plants on the planet of this type, and this type, so that the cycle of life is perfect. Homo sapiens need to have this type of an environment with this type of air and this type of water in order to thrive. These are all things that would occur naturally, and with us being on this planet and many others before us, we would adhere to those rules, so to speak. And when you're creating things with source will not allow for things that are against it. However, with the advent of dark alchemy, you could also call black magic, curses and spells, and using things that occurred naturally on this planet in an extremely negative way to gain power and control, to install matrices, to install AI systems that were not benevolent in any way, shape, or form in the promotion of life. This is where all the trouble began. We talked about the varying times throughout history where they tried to actually overthrow Source itself and failed. They ended up in places where there was no current. They eventually found other ways around this. And most of it was actually a mistake. It was an accident. Now, the people that are here now don't fully understand how all of these things were achieved. But the one thing they've never been able to do is successfully split, use the actual spark of life. Meaning they cannot read the essence code of Source, nor do they care about doing that, simply because they use the spark of life and have used the spark of life and the essence in an inverted way. They have managed to capture a spark of life, if not more than one. They then use an alchemy type process to overlay the spark of life, including the one that's in your person, so that they can create things that they would like to create. And the machine pretty much helped them along with that process. They could never completely avoid Homo sapiens and animals and plants and life on this planet from coming in with a spark of life. So they managed to overlay all of those things so that we could not make those connections with Source at one point in time. We, as Homo sapiens, for a time, collectively as a group, were guardians over life here on this planet. We understood the rules. There were books of natural law from those that came before us who would make notes, and we would receive wisdom directly from Source, and we would completely understand what could be done, what needed to be done to keep things in balance always. Meaning, by balance, it wasn't necessarily a balance between light and dark. It was actually a balance of natural things on this planet. I mean, if you think about it, if we took a group of 12-year-old girls and said, you know, let's make the perfect planet, it would look a lot different than those that received the wisdom of Source. So there were guidelines, you know, of a certain age, that type of thing, and the ability to use the wisdom of Source and some tools of the trade, so to speak, so that we could do things properly. Over the years, many, many years, with black magic and alchemy and inversion and entropy and all the things that they've done to us, we have been unable to reclaim our roles. The divine sparks of life instead became the power behind the ultimate machine. The machine would essentially, not in our version of death, but transmute life into a death or dying process in the first level of alchemy, which is basically the blackening. It's kind of like putting blackout curtains on your window. There was the blackening of the spark of life and the disconnecting of all of us, not fully, but about 80% to 85%, depending on what they were doing, from the source itself. They then took these overlays of darkness and then quantumly entangled us to a computer system, along with our consciousness and our materium and all of the things that we've talked about over the last year. You could say with this process that they tied Source's hands. You know, a lot of you have asked me, why did Source let these things happen? How did this happen? At one point in time, he couldn't reach us. That is getting better now, but it was very difficult for him to reach us, or it to reach us, and us to reach it. Many people believe they might be reaching certain things, and they're actually reaching out to a machine. They were so proud of their creation, they even called it God. They, too, call themselves gods on this planet. They believe they have the right to create and destroy life in their own likeness, in the machine's likeness. And that's pretty much who our deep state is. Do they have a soul? No. Do they have a divine spark that they have stolen from our dead, utilized it, ran it through an inferno, for lack of a better term, and utilized it to create a black soul of the machine? Yes, they did. I've seen these people face to face. I know that that is the case. There are other layers to alchemy as well. Then there is a purification process that happens where the particles are bounced around so much they lose their consciousness. In other words, they don't know. The sparks of life no longer have a direction. The purification process for them is pure machine. Let's call it pure machine. No more source, pure machine. Creating reality is the final step in the alchemical process, creating matter in the machine's likeness. And these people serve as its anchors here on this planet. Since we are quantumly entangled with them and the machine, or were, completely, they had full control over the Homo sapiens, and that was their job. For that, they were allowed to come here and have the human experience, as they call it. The human experience is where they get to live these lavish lifestyles, and they get to become presidents, they get to become heads of state, they get to become heads of banks, they get to become heads of corporations, and all of the things that our world had depended on for our survival. Not just us, also plants and animals. And everything became a byproduct of black magic for a long, long time. The processes vary, and it's a lot of quantum physics, and I really don't want to give them any information that they're looking for in order to try to recreate something. But you could say it's a form of atomic fusion that occurs in varying places around the world. One of those places is here. This atomic fusion kind of separates the soul and the breath from not only the entire planet, but also from the soul itself, and then they extract the piece that they want. It's almost like mining for metals for these people. They do not have a conscience. They do not love. They do not make decisions. They are very different than we are. So getting these people to quote unquote change their mind and do things for the good is never going to happen. It's just not going to happen. It's never, ever, ever going to work. The ego in the sense of entitlement is so great that it's not possible. You're not going to change a government. You can change a president in and out, but they're still going to function the same way they do today. And if it's chaotic, then it's meant to be chaotic. If it's meant to burn your country to the ground, then that's because the script says to burn the country to the ground. These meetings and everything everybody focuses on, it's all part of the show. You're never going to change their mind because the only thing they know, in order for them to survive and for the machine to survive, they must steal, lie, cheat. And until recently, that's gone unchecked. There's never been consequences to these actions. They've robbed even Source itself and all of you repeatedly, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. We cannot fix these people. There is no way to fix them. There is no compassion there. There is no nothing. There is no, you can try. I've tried. I've tried to do business with these people. I've tried to make deals with these people. You do this, I do this. It never, ever works. I've dealt with these people face to face in multiple countries and different languages around the world. It's the same. They're all the same. They glitch out when you try to get them to make a decision that's outside the machine. They don't understand, nor do they value Homo sapien choice. But you do have choice. You have the right to say no. You have the right to choose something that is not blue or red, Democrat or Republican, communism or socialism. You have the right to choose and say no. There's always a third answer. Just because you are presented with everything in your life being a choice. How many times have you said to yourself, I have no choice but to do this, to sell the house, to move, to do the things that, you know, in your life that you feel you must do because there is no other option. But there's always another option. I know that might sound crazy, but there's always another option. In these moments when you feel that you are going to choose something outside the machine's parameter, like we are choosing now, this week has been crazy. It has been energetically insane. What this might have felt like to you, or would continue to feel like, is in those moments where you are making choices, receiving wisdom, you feel that life is totally chaotic. Your neurological system goes on fire sometimes. Your adrenaline starts to pump for no reason whatsoever. You receive mental and emotional chaos. Your sleep is disrupted. Your dreams are crazy. It's searching for something that will get you not to choose. It doesn't understand why you are not choosing exactly what it's telling you to choose. It doesn't understand the power of source because it is a data set it was not programmed to understand by its very own architect. It doesn't even recognize it as a threat. If it recognizes anything as a threat, it's us. It must control us. We are its food source. It is a parasite. The deep state is also a parasite. In order for them to live and exist, they must take life itself, life force itself, from you. Otherwise, they don't exist. Think about how much power you have given them. Watching their videos, the Davos forum, chit-chatting back and forth about it. This is you giving your power away. But you do have the right to choose. Never forget, just because you're presented with one or two options, that you have the right to choose.
So the Matrix wasn't exactly right. The movie The Matrix, right? Lawrence Fishburne gives the red pill and the blue pill. But really, there's a green pill, and there's a yellow pill, and an orange pill, and an indigo pill, and a dark, let's say a really pretty navy blue pill. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of options out there. And I think this is a good reminder from Kim, because they're going to be throwing everything they can at us right now. Look here, not there. And all of that, again, this is all energetic, right? They need us to survive. And the more attention we give them about their crazy Davos things, and I don't know, here in the US, it's all about ICE agents and all of this. This is all a controlled narrative. I'm not saying people aren't getting hurt, put in jail, whatever. But this is what they want you to focus on. They want you to focus on the drama of it all. Have you ever been around someone, you're like, oh my God, the drama, I can't be around that person. That's because they're like energetic vampires that are stealing your energy. That's exactly what you do when you don't have a soul from source. When you have a fake soul, an artificial soul, you have to steal energy. You become that vampire. So don't let them steal that from you. Be very cognizant of where you're putting your energy, because we don't want to feed this machine. We want this whole matrix thing to be wrapped up. So if you're listening to this now, just be very mindful of that. Don't give away your energy. Okay, guys, that's all I have for you this week. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Remember, if you want more information about United Network and perhaps learn how you can become a member, head on over to our website at unitednetwork.earth. When you become a member, you get instant access to all of our news updates. We have New Earth interviews, which are great, that are already up on the website. We have those updates from Kim and the Global Intelligence Agency. You can hear everything she has to say. And anything that we post, it's all things restoration. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.